It's time for our first panel discussion of the day. Allow me to welcome to the stage Spears contributing editor Alec Marsh, who is joined by four leading industry figures to discuss the rise of alternative banking platforms. Alec and guests, please take it away.
Good morning, guys. Oh, hello.
Hey, all right.
Are you ready, chaps? Good morning, everyone. My name's Alec Marsh. It's my great pleasure to be hosting the first panel of Spears 400 Live 2025, which is being held in association with Interpolitan Money. Our topic this morning, is it on the board? Yes, it is. The rise of alternative banking platforms, customised solutions for UHNWs and family offices with expanding global demands. Joining us to drill into this topic this morning, I have Rishi Patel, the CEO and founder of Interpolitan Money. We have Matthew Duncan, who is let's check my list here, Matthew, I can't read yet this morning, the head of private wealth at Druces, which is a law firm, of course. Then we have Stuart Wakeling, who's managing partner at Henley Partners and head of the firm's London and Africa offices. And then at the end there, we have Paul Fosse, Group Head of Banking and Treasury at the fund solutions provider JTC Group. Please welcome our panel. Now, before we begin, we've got half an hour of chats, then we're going to come to you for questions. If you want to ask questions, you can use Slido, and the tag, I think, is on the board behind me. If you prefer to do it the old-fashioned way, which is to say put your hand up at the end and wait for a roving mic or simply to shout, then that is also available, but please be polite to the panellists. Okay, so let's begin then. First of all, alternative banking platforms, what are they? I'm going to break from our agreed formula and turn to our legal friend, first of all, to offer a definition that will be palatable to everyone in the room of what an alternative banking platform is.
Oh, great. I was expecting you to ask Rishi that question. I mean, basically, you know what a traditional bank is. Most people are familiar with that. Alternative banking platforms offer effectively, a lot of it is digital, a lot of it is online, modern technology, fintech. It's embracing all of those things, basically finding a way to provide services that haven't been provided by banks traditionally and are filling a space that wasn't there before, and clients are certainly embracing it.
And on the point of the difference between a bank and an alternative bank, because we're all familiar with things like neobanks, EMIs, electronic money institutions, etc. How do the words get used, and what's your experience of what those institutions are?
They get used in all sorts of different ways, and people interchange the use of them. But essentially, it is a way of, you've got digital currencies, people will be familiar with crypto. It's those sorts of things that people are dealing with.
And to what extent do you think that division matters?
Division doesn't really matter. No.
Okay. Before I turn to you, Rishi, I'm going to turn to Paul, because you're at the far end, and I feel we need to bring you into the conversation. So look, Paul, you're a fund solutions provider. I think it's fair to say you look under the bonnet of the financial system from a different position from these guys. So how do you classify alternative banking platforms when someone asks you at a dinner party, oh, what's that?
It's a great dinner party subject as well.
It is.
If I look at it from our client viewpoint, right, a lot of our clients are global. Global for a lot of traditional banks, not all traditional banks, means complex. But global doesn't have to mean complex. When you lift the lid on it, a lot of the traditional banks have cross-border policy challenges internally, where if you look at the alternative banking space, they're built with global wealth in mind. They're thinking about that not one client is just in one jurisdiction anymore. They're in multiple locations. They offer alternative services such as in-country IBANs, which can be super beneficial for clients. And they challenge the way that traditional banking is working as well. They're looking at onboarding from a different viewpoint. Again, if you go to open a new bank account in a different country or a different area, sometimes it can be a trigger point. It can be a review of the whole file, and that takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time away from running our family offices, our high net worth positions, and things like that. So alternative banking providers, with their link in with a digital approach, KYC, things like that, is providing a new service that is challenging the way of traditional banks working.
Okay, so that was more of a description, less of a definition, but I'll let you get away with it. Okay, Rishi, now turn to you. You run and have founded an alternative banking platform. So first of all, what do you make of your co-panelists' descriptions? And then can you tell us in your own words what you are, what your category of firm is?
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Look, I think both Matt and Paul summed up fairly well. When you think of alternative banking, you really are thinking about financial solutions delivered outside of the core high street banks, the core private banks. Digital first models delivered by specialist providers. And I think you've got, generally, I think it's fair to say that the models executed are much faster, much more efficient, tailored solutions. You've got also, I think, some sort of focus and priority on areas of banking and payments that banks don't necessarily prioritise. So Paul mentioned a bit about cross-border payments. There's also multi-currency account elements, foreign exchange elements, but generally, alternatives are much more flexible. They can deliver solutions around global banking. So in summary, I think I would say banks today are very much focused and very much stable organisations. Alternatives are much more agile. Family offices today want both, and increasingly they're finding it difficult to find that balance within the legacy institutions, hence why we're seeing this shift into alternative banking.
Okay, well, I think that should stimulate some interesting questions from the bankers in the room. So Stuart Wakeling, let's turn to you. So you're Henley Partners, and you provide citizenship advice to many wealthy people around the world. So I think you should have a sense of what it is they need. What is it about alternative banks that you think they find attractive, and how does it connect with their changing lifestyles and work styles?
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't ask me anything about alternative banking, because I have no clue about that. It would have been some embarrassing silences in that regard. What we do at Henley Partners is find additional residencies or citizenships for high net worth individuals. Historically, our clients wouldn't necessarily have actually relocated. If we look back sort of 10 years ago, roughly 10 or less % of our clients would have actually gone and relocated to the jurisdiction in which they were obtaining, a residence or citizenship. With the advent of Mr. Trump and Mrs. Reeves and everything else that we have going on in the likes of the UK at the moment, that's changing. More and more people are relocating. And with relocation comes the obvious difficulties, right? So often when clients get to us, they are multi-banked. They're obviously very wealthy. They're multi-banked. They're cross-border banked. And so it can lead to just an extended relationship with their existing bank. However, that's not always the case. Often options are needed. People come to us for optionality. People come to us for that plan B, that what if. And so that extends to the banking world. They are needing alternative banking solutions. They are needing fast solutions. They're needing cross-border solutions, and that's where our clients sometimes need that service.
Is that something they report to you, or is that something you're just reading into their behaviours?
So clients ask us a multitude of different questions, even to the extent where some of the girls in my team are having to sort out their mobile phone contracts. It really does extend to that level of kind of service. However, often part of our service, if there's sort of, let's say we've got Mr. Britain who's doing a Portugal residency, they will come to us and say, can you help us with a bank account, etc. And that's where we step in. Okay, so let's turn to you, Rishi. So what are your clients, these sort of individuals that Stuart's been describing, what are they coming to you for?
Yeah, I think there's two areas. One is obviously the immigration mandates, and it's incredibly difficult for non-resident clients, and particularly private clients, to access banking in countries where they haven't got a footprint. Go into the likes of the high street banks, without any local documentation would be a significant challenge. Looking at the private banks, again, there's minimum requirements. There's going to be minimum balances. Many would be around £3 million, £5 million to start relationships, etc. So I think just generally there's a cultural issue here. The banks today aren't really set up for the globalized nature of the world we have.
Okay, and how are you able to offer those accounts so rapidly to people without necessarily fulfilling the immigration mandate, those technicalities, or do you have a different way of doing that?
Yeah, I think what you'll find in the alternative banking space is that firms are much more selective about the target market and the client base that they're working with. They understand it very well. They understand the limitations of what's available. So really, it's about understanding compliance and really executing a compliance strategy at a global level rather than a localized level, and really trying to work with clients and see what they can provide when it comes to things like source of wealth and source of funds.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the room now, and if you're not afraid to put your hands up, if you're able to, how many of you would agree with Rishi's statement there? Because I think it's quite a big statement that traditional banks aren't set up for the globalized nature of UHNW wealth. Who agrees with that statement here? It's a fair minority, and including traditional bankers who can put their hands up, who disagrees with that statement. Okay, even fewer. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate your massive participation in that poll. Okay, all right. So I think something that you've hinted at, Rishi, is this issue of accessing banking facilities. So Matthew, Duncan of Druces, if I could turn to you. In 2023, an individual named Nigel Farage was debanked by a prominent financial institution. As late as last November, another legal firm, Farrer & Co., described debanking as the hidden menace, and drew on figures from the government showing 140,000 small businesses have been debanked in 2023 alone. How serious a problem is debanking in this country, and how serious is it for the sorts of people that Spears readers are most focused upon?
I think it really is a serious issue. Certainly clients I act for, it is a problem. What we're increasingly finding is that clients that are changing jurisdictions regularly and moving around more and more, finding their traditional banking relationship is not open to them. For whatever reason, it may be the jurisdiction they're moving to the bank is uncomfortable with. It may be the investments they have they're uncomfortable with. It may be simply they don't understand the structuring. They may be trying to borrow on an asset in a different jurisdiction that they're not comfortable with. And so debanking is a real problem and a real issue. And then the other flip side of that is actually trying to get an account open as well. Increasingly, it will take 3 to 6 months for clients to get banks up and running, and that is often far too slow for people. For family offices and clients that need decisions made quickly, it's a real problem. If they're moving to a new jurisdiction, they don't have an existing banking relationship, to go into a high street bank and try and get a banking relationship is impossible. It's not going to happen. So those two things are causing high net worth clients a real issue.
If I were from the Guardian, say, I might sit here and say, yes, but there's a lot of crooks out there, and we've got to be really careful. We catch these people, stop them bringing their ill-gotten gains into the country. I mean, that's never happened before. So how do we reassure them that that's not the case?
Yeah, I think that is a public perception, isn't it, that that's what they're doing. But ultimately, I mean, these clients, they have legitimate businesses, they have legitimate source of wealth, and provided you have the checks and balances in place to check all of that, there's no reason why they shouldn't have a bank, rather than just a blanket no, which is what is happening, and clients are really experiencing that.
Okay, Paul Fosse then, JTC. What's your experience of why international wealthy people are turning to alternative providers? I assume it fits with what Matt's been saying, but could you expand on that?
Yeah, without a doubt. 2008, 2010, banking became more difficult. That was the turning point, really. Banking became harder. And then you've gone through that period of cash being a dead asset to a degree. It was in an interest rate environment from 2008 to, let's say, 2021, where cash wasn't really earning anything or costing you money at some times as well. And then 2021 forward to now, cash is suddenly making you return, and the banks haven't caught up as much. So we're seeing some family offices, high net worth individuals looking to work that as an asset now. And that's where they can turn to alternative providers to move banking. Some of the banks are slow to pass on interest rate uptakes. And the beauty then of working with alternative providers is that it's the job of companies like JTC to make that asset then work. It's to work with the partners that can get a return on the cash. And it's giving them that ability to be agile and finding solutions that work. The other one that we see as well is things like in-country IBANs. If you've got a house or a business in a different location, to have an in-country IBAN can make all the difference when you're paying expenses and things like that as well.
So you talk about the return of cash. Rishi, I wonder, I mean, in our conversations before, you said one of the things that you don't do, and one of the things that sets Interpolitan away from traditional banks is you don't lend. But, you know, if we are in a cash-rich situation, is lending less of a barrier to people coming to you? I mean, it leads to my next question, which is the resistance people might find. You know, money is a conservative topic. Many of the financial institutions in this country, chart their antecedents to the Georgian or Victorian era. You know, there's a lot of weight in bricks and mortar. You guys, you're online. Have you noticed a sort of resistance amongst the super rich to bringing their wedge to your door?
So, look, I think with any sort of new model when it comes to financial services, etc., and it's not really that new anymore. I mean, we're sort of at least sort of 15, 20 years into this movement. But there is going to be a staged process. Trust is built over time. But I think it comes down to three core elements. One is regulatory status. The second is operational transparency. And the third is demonstrable capability. So let's take regulatory status. Generally, you always want to work with a highly regulated firm, regulated in a recognised jurisdiction. So in the UK, you've got electronic money institutions that are regulated by the FCA. In Germany, you'll have institutions regulated by BaFin. In the UAE, institutions, again, regulated by the DIFC. So that's in a very easy recognition area. The second, operational transparency. This is generally available through information collected and doing some research. Who are the alternative banks working with for clearing? Are they working with the tier one banks? Are they safeguarding funds with the tier one banks? A lot of these checks can be done well in advance. And the third element of demonstrable capability, I think, comes down to, are they really embedded in the ecosystem of the marketplace in which they operate? So, for example, if they're focused on the private client or the family office side, are they part of the ecosystem? Are they working with the law firms, the wealth managers, the corporate service providers, the fiduciary and trust companies, etc.? So I think if you can really address the issue of trust around those three areas, I think you can get some comfort.
Okay, let's turn to you guys. In order, please. Matt, have you noticed, I mean, your clients use alternative banking platforms. Have you noticed a resistance to adopting them, or is it headlong rush?
I certainly haven't noticed a resistance. In actual fact, quite a few family offices have invested themselves heavily into these platforms, or have actually created them themselves because they've found a need and they had the money and resources to create a solution. Where you may have some resistance is either because they don't understand it and not understand what's being offered as a service. And secondly, for most families, the key for them is security, data security in particular, and privacy. And if they can be reassured on those two things, then they'll be happy to go along with these alternative products and solutions.
Stuart, can I put that to you? Can you offer another? Are your clients suspicious of these providers, or do you think no?
No, I mean, when clients come to us, they are typically the more adventurous.
Right.
To put it bluntly, I remember when I started in this industry 10 years ago, I was at a law firm's event, and I talked about what we did. And the lady said to me, "Oh, you're the dodgy guys who offer dodgy citizenships in the Caribbean." And I swiftly left.
Yeah.
That's not what we do.
That wasn't Druces, by the way.
Yeah, it wasn't Druces. They're much more open to such things. That wasn't what we do. But historically, clients who come to us have been more open to change, more open to exploration. And obviously, what we do is alternative, and therefore they are more interested in the alternative. So we don't see any resistance to it. The only suggestion the only point I would suggest is that it's not necessarily sticking large amounts initially into it. They are edging into it.
So they're on the trust pathway.
Yeah, and same in what we had to do. When I travelled across Africa, I would say what we do and how we do it, and it was very much an education process first of all, gain the trust, and then do significant business after that. And I think this will follow the same route.
Brilliant. Paul, have you noticed any reluctance to embrace these tech-enabled outsiders, or is it the opposite to that?
I think it's more of a hybrid approach from what I've seen. I think for me, the traditional bank plays a huge part. A lot of these family office and high net worth individuals have got a lot of loyalty to the banks that have banked them for years as well. So a lot of them, a bit like you just said there, is that they will try them. They will move some aspects of cash or banking to them, but they'll use that hybrid approach. But over time, we're certainly seeing more being used as that trust is being enabled. But equally, I think clients have the right to challenge it. There are some bad actors in town who might overpromise on the tech side of it, or they might say that they can add more services than they can. There's that overpromising aspect of it. So it's also the role of the intermediary to play that role of due diligence, like Rishi said, counterparty selection, reviews, and ensuring that you've done your checks for your client as well.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we've got just over 10 minutes till we turn to questions from the floor, so please, sharpen your pencils. The title of this talk includes the word rise, so there is an implication that we're going to see the rise of alternative banking platforms. But let me put it to you. I think I can tell what you're going to say, Rishi, to answer this question. But what do you regard the outlook is for this sector and for alternative banking providers? Let's turn to you first, Paul. We'll come in this way.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the rise to them, but I think it will soon become the norm. I think
so they'll become mainstream, is what you think?
Mainstream's a strong word, but not too far off mainstream.
Okay.
I can sit on the fence a little bit. I think for me, it's making actually traditional banking up their game as well. The beauty of alternative banking is that they've been built on global platforms. They've been built on fintech solutions, a lot of them, where traditional banks have that challenge of adapting due to legacy software. They also have the challenge of legacy approaches to compliance, cross-border policies and things like that. So I think actually alternative banking platforms will help challenge the banks to work in a different way as well. And I think we'll get to a stage where they'll equal out to a degree as well.
Equal out. Stuart, do you take a view on this, or is this outside the realm?
Yeah, it's probably outside my realm, given that we have an extensive amount of referrals from private banks and established banks. It's probably best for me to keep quiet on this. Pass
on. Very good, very sensible. Okay, so, all right, so Paul spoke very persuasively about, how alternative banks are forcing the mainstream banks to up their game and will not become, if quite the mainstream, then normal, or more normal. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think I'd echo Paul's comments. And you're actually seeing traditional banks now are upping their game already. They're improving their tech. Clients are able to access information and data a lot easier now. You're also seeing them closing high street branches. They're becoming more and more online as a response, I think, to the alternative banking sector coming after their clients, basically. So there's room for both of them, clearly. And I think Paul's right. Eventually, they will become part of the norm.
Okay, so you're forcing mainstream banks to up their game, Rishi. Well done. How long do you think Interpolitan Money will be kind of more mainstream, and what does that look like to you?
So I think the goal here isn't necessarily for alternatives to become mainstream. I think alternative bank providers and private banks and high street banks can coexist very well. They've all got their strengths. If you look at, I guess, a lot of the high street banks, they're very good at domestic work. They're very good at, if you're a UK national that wants to open a UK, and you're a UK resident, you want to open a bank account in the UK, that's a great opportunity for high street banks. It works very well. The alternatives are generally much more focused on the cross-border aspects. Interestingly, if you cross-border asset acquisitions right now are at a record high. They've never been at these levels. And it's really those sort of transactions that the alternatives are designed to service. So I think it's not really a game of competition here. I think it's really about working within the niches, understanding the marketplace, and designing solutions and bespoke, tailored solutions for those industries.
Earlier on, Matthew said it might take 3 to 6 months to open a bank account. I mean, how long do you guys take to?
When we receive a full and complete compliance pack, it's normally around 7 to 10 days.
7 to 10 days. But how long does it take to complete that full compliance pack?
3 to 6 months.
Yeah, between that conversation and the end point. Here's your pack, sir. Off you go. Right. But what's that look like? Look,
I mean, every family is different, and they've got. They've got their records held accordingly. But if we would, when we started that discussion, once the information were to come out, we would expect that back within days.
Right. Okay.
It's rare that it would take a week for a family to consolidate that, and then that process would begin.
Before Paul definitely wants to come in there, go on.
Yeah, I do feel sorry sometimes for the banks because I think sometimes they get a bit of a bad rep in the account opening space. We play a hybrid role working in banking and treasury where we can get to sit between the banks and our admins, and sometimes when you talk to the banks they might not receive that fully complete pack, so they can't open it, and then sometimes that goes into the lead time as well. So yeah,
this is some sort of institutional sectoral compassion going on here.
I feel like I might have been a bit hard on traditional banks, right? So I've got to level it out.
Paul wants to get out of here safely.
Excellent. Well, look, this is very good. So, look, let's. So, in terms of your vision, then, for your firm as the alternative bank on the stage, I mean, if you think of alternative banks, one springs to mind: Revolut. Is it your ambition to make Interpolitan Money the Revolut for high net worths or family offices?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair statement. Revolut have done an excellent job when it comes to consumer banking, and they're now moving into the sort of small business market. And I think they've done a good job there as well. But it comes back to the core point: the alternative banking's providers are generally going to be focused on niches. And for us, we've done a lot of work in the family office space. We've completed some excellent transactions in real estate or hotel deals. And for us, we'll continue to focus on those areas. We'll continue to work with families. We're trying to understand what the future looks like and design solutions and products that will fit within their mandates.
Okay, so it won't be lost on the audience that, of course, Revolut has obtained a full banking license, isn't it? So is that something that you might look to do in the future as you evolve your business? Is that of interest?
Yeah, I guess it's not immediately on the radar. Yeah. Potentially at some time, if we really see opportunities in the lending space. So currently, many alternatives are licensed as electronic money institutions, and that is that therefore they can't deliver any form of lending, credit, debt, finance solution. So if we see opportunities there, we would certainly consider it. But it's not something on the radar at the moment. I think from a transaction banking perspective, there's a lot of work to do, and as Paul mentioned earlier, the issuing of local IBANs in country where wealth is generally flowing, there's some huge opportunities here for us.
Okay, 2 quick questions before we turn to the floor, and this is to all of you. Evidently, there are lots of operators moving into the space who are, as you say, obliging the mainstream banks to up the game a little bit. But what message do the big private banks need to be listening from clients who are making this move? Paul, shall I start with you?
I think it's really looking at the customer journey again. I think a lot of organizations, not just banks, are focusing on AI, tech, and we're losing the fact that relationship management is key, right? Understanding your client, looking them in the eye, and then I go on to AI, sorry. AI is great, but it doesn't necessarily pick up on the nuances. It doesn't pick up on those little differentiators that allow you to understand the client. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is that don't just focus on upping the tech side of it. Look at the overall relationship and that customer journey as well.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating we're even having this conversation. I don't think we'd have been having this conversation a long time ago. And as we said at the start, it's kind of linked back to the mobility of clients and the fact that they are becoming more globally mobile. If we go back 10 years, globally, there was around 60,000 millionaires going somewhere different. We take that back to last year, 10 years later, it was 132,000, so over double. And you will have seen the statistics that we launched last year, this time last year, where we predicted, along with New World Wealth, the loss of around about 9,500 millionaires. It actually ended up being closer to 11,000 millionaires from the UK. And all of this change brings about the need for change. And I think where we've worked really well with traditional private banks and wealth managers is when those bankers and wealth managers are more open to the fact that their clients are doing this. This is not me, Henley Partners, Stuart Wakeling, get all your clients to bugger off. It's not that. It's clients are becoming aware that the fact that they need to be globally mobile, they need that plan B, and they are seeking better opportunities, better global mobility, better travel tools. And so with that brings about the need for this.
Matthew, same question.
I think for me, the challenge is actually engagement with clients. I think Paul alluded to it. Tech is brilliant on one level, but you still need to engage with clients ultimately. And the challenge you've got, certainly with the rising generation or the next gen, is their loyalty to the traditional way of doing things is very different. And that, for me, is going to be a big challenge. And how the alternative banking platforms engage with those types of clients coming up and inheriting the wealth. They'll be in multiple jurisdictions. They're moving around all the time. And that, for me, is a challenge, not just looking at the AI piece. It's the good old-fashioned, how do you interact with the next gen and rising gen coming into the fore.
Okay, now, Rishi, same question to you, but differently. If you're sitting in the same space as the CEO of a prominent private bank, and you're saying, no, what advice do you, not that you would give them advice, but if they asked, particularly on the space that you work in, which is kind of the niche or the transactional niche, what advice would you give them about where they're going wrong?
I think it comes down to really trying to redesign a banking proposition for the world we live in today. We've talked about family offices being incredibly or globally mobile. They're asset rich, they're time poor. Their biggest challenges are around wealth concentration in specific jurisdictions. Banking has to evolve to address these real issues. And I think it will really come down to seeing a significant cultural shift. It just comes back to my core point that banking today is very different. The demands that clients have from banks are very different to what they were many years back. And I think we really need to see some evolution here.
Okay, right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to questions from you guys. I'll check the computer, but has anybody got a question, in which case the mic will rove straight to you. The drone will bring it straight over. Any questions? Any questions? Let me see if I can work this device. Ah, yes. It's remaining black on the screen. But look, while you think of a question, I will ask something else that has sort of come to mind. On a more kind of holistic level, are we concerned that Britain is over-regulating itself on the banking stage? How much of a disincentive to global wealth are we creating with our well-intentioned tsunami of compliance we've created over the past decade? Who wants to go first on that? Paul, you're looking cheerful.
Yeah, I was just about to volunteer as well.
Yeah.
No, I think we should be proud of it, actually. I don't think we should shy away from being highly regulated. I think we should actually embrace it. And what Rishi said before, I actually think going for a full banking license then takes you out of that alternative space, because you can no longer be agile in the way you work. So I think that actually we should be continuing down that approach. I think we should stay strong behind it. And it's for us and service providers to actually change the way in our approach to make sure we capture it and make it easier for clients to demonstrate it as well.
Okay, so Stuart, you obviously advise people moving to and fro, and you're seeing a lot more people leaving than coming this way. To what degree do you think Britain's reputation and to desire to be a kind of regulator in chief, do you think that dissuades people from coming here?
I kind of agree with Paul. I think we should be proud of the regulations, and it's what's kept us sort of nice and steady for the last number of decades. People are coming to us. So I was the Sky presenter I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, tried to catch me out on this. She said, we're telling people to leave the UK. That's absolutely not what we're doing. All we're doing is reporting on what's happening. But lots of people are leaving it for more advantageous places for them. You know, we have a myriad of different reasons why people come to us. Tax is one of the main ones. I've even had a lady, she was in the gym the other day, sat in the cafe of her gym, and she said, I'm so sick and tired of the rain, I want to live somewhere warm. So it's the regulations in the UK is not necessarily a big part of what we do, but tax, political instability. I'm not just talking for British clients, of course, but more tax advantageous places, climate, political instability, economic turmoil, greater mobility. These are the reasons that we're seeing it. It's never really stated that that regulations and the like is a factor.
Okay, so now Matthew, you're obviously a lawyer, and I know it's good news for lawyers, isn't it? But what's your position? No one will obviously speak down our regulations, but you know, has it reached saturation point? Are you at the point saying no more, or just?
No, I don't think I am. In actual fact, if you look at other jurisdictions, they are gearing up their regulation, and I think they're looking to the UK as an example. And so you're actually going to see more and more regulation around the world, not less. And the UK, I think, is a leading example in that, and should be. And actually is an attraction for people actually inbound, because they know they've got a set of rules that can be relied upon, a judicial system that will stand behind it. And that's a good selling point for UK PLC. So I'm certainly not an advocate of getting rid of regulation. Certainly it can be streamlined and improved, no doubt. But I do feel we are a leading example and should remain so.
Okay, brilliant. Now, Rishi, let's turn to you. Your firm has footprints in London, Dubai and Mumbai, which I think tells us something about where you think the presence and future of money is. Let's turn lastly to this question of looking at this topic from the outside. What does the rise of alternative banking platforms, non-normal banking platforms, what does that mean? What does it tell us about the people that we're all concerned about, all interested in this room, the global high net worth community? How are they changing? We've obviously alluded to it already, more mobile, but there's also other aspects, the multi-generational nature of the wealth, the rising youth dimension, and of course tastes in terms of technology. I'll start with you, Rishi. What can you tell us about what you think this phenomenon says about the people out there that we're concerned with?
Yeah, I think just generally we are seeing significant movements of wealth from emerging markets, from right across the Asia Pacific, and a lot of that is looking for diversification. The biggest challenge they have as investors, as mediators, is really completing transactions. So I think without alternative banks being here today, there would really be significant friction in that entire process. But coming back to the broader point around regulations, I think what's really interesting here is we've seen many regulators around the world design regulation based on the UK framework. And I think that's an excellent endorsement to really what we've built here, and we should really be proud of that. The real change we need to see is how institutions embed those requirements within their frameworks and how compliance departments actually process at speed. That needs to change, I think, so we need to see more of a cultural shift.
Okay, brilliant. Paul, something that Rishi just mentioned there, he talked about, without alternative banks, there will be, significant friction in the the financial activities of the globally mobile wealthy. Is that something that you accord with entirely?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think wealth is becoming more global, so we have to be more agile. So I think it lends itself nicely to that side of it as well. Also go back to something that Matthew said as well, whereby the next generation is coming through, using cash differently than what we've ever used before. They look at cash and they look at the approach to investments as different as well. There's that study at the moment that says about the rise of the crypto millionaire and things like that. So we've got to be agile and working in different ways to make sure that we can capture and support the next generation through wealth as well. So I think that's really the place for me. Okay,
then both of you two, before we close, or for one last question perhaps, what do you think that the rise of alternatives tells us about the wealthy out there? If there's anything else I can draw from you.
If I go back to what I was saying earlier, at Henley Partners, we have inquiries from 148 nationalities since we've started. 98 nationalities made inquiries to our services last year. So I think that tells you everything about what Rishi was saying. Wealth is changing. Wealth is scattered across the planet, and they are all looking at their options and alternative options.
Okay. Matthew?
I think the final comment for me is it just shows how they are embracing technology and wanting to find a way of dealing with our wealth efficiently, quickly, with minimal resistance.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, are there any questions? Have any questions, Mr. Major? We have two there. Right, look at that. So, can the drone, the mic? Yes, look at that. Thank you very much.
So I'm a regulatory lawyer, AML sanctions. I thought for balance I'd offer a different view on that last question, which is, I think UK does get regulation wrong. It's not about the aims of the regulations, which we can all agree with. We want privacy, we want security. We want to do something about dirty money, although maybe it should be about enforcing against dirty money rather than keeping it out. But it's difficult to see how globally you can reform those laws to make them more user-friendly, because so many of them come from the EU, and that process is going to be very difficult. But the UK has got an opportunity, doesn't it, to reform regulation in a way that achieves those aims in a more cost-effective way. That's more of a comment than a question. But
well, let's put it as a question. I mean, Rishi, what do you make of that?
I think that's one for Matt, really.
Okay.
So I'll leave it with him.
I think I entirely agree with that comment. I mean, it makes sense to me, yes.
So, but it offers an institutional opportunity, doesn't it? The way you can finesse your organisation to work through those regulations or work to them.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is something we think about regularly. Oh, yeah. How can we continue to get better internally? How can we continue to maintain a certain pace? How can we design a process that will really ensure we can continue to meet the efficiencies and speed required by clients?
And if the UK is the benchmark by which many jurisdictions, create their own regulations, and that obviously serves as an advantage to all of you, everyone in the space here, I suppose.
Yeah, I think two things. One, the UK has done an excellent job at creating competition in this space as well, and they really have delivered leading regulations, enabling competition to come through, and a lot of the world is now copying that. So we've seen various regulators around the world really designing frameworks and designing legislation that really the UK have put together. So I think for us as an organisation now, it's much easier to operate in these new markets because we've seen that synergy.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, look, that is an unexpectedly high, upbeat moment in these days of doom and gloom to conclude our panel. In half an hour's time, we have our next panel, which is taking a look at the world of luxury out of Miami. Between then and now, we have coffee, so please go away and enjoy it. For now, I'd like us to thank our wonderful panel, Rishi Patel, Duncan, Matthew Duncan, Stuart Wakeling, and Paul Fosse. Thank you very much.